There are two things in the market's movement last week that I think will be misleading once I show you the raw data. So I just want to go over that and make sure you're better educated. Let's check out the numbers and the nuance. My name is Christopher McGee. I'm the owner of Halcyon Real Estate. Halcyon Real Estate is affiliated with the Keller Williams Market Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. Today is the 4th of September. It's Labor Day. Happy Labor Day 2023. And this is the numbers and the nuance. Every week, I'm going over the raw data in the MLS and presenting it to you, giving you the charts to show you how they track and trend over time. And I just want people to be better educated on Utah's housing market. That's what this channel is about. And just before we look at this prior week's numbers, don't forget, if you want a better deep dive on what all these numbers I'm gonna go over mean, you can look at my real estate numbers explained video, and that's flagged at the top right of your screen. You can check that out and be solid on those numbers and what it all means. Right now, let's look at the prior week's numbers. All right, this last week's inventory comes to 8,978. That's down by just 6, but that is the first time it's gone down from week to week since April this year. It's one of the things I'll mention briefly in the nuance portion of this video. Let's go to the next number. Last week, our average days on market was 48 days. And that's up 2 from the previous week, and you can see that red trend line, how it's down and to the right, how overall from the beginning of April, this number has been coming down, but we see that it came down from almost 60 to about 40, hovered around 40, and for the last couple of months, we see it creeping back up. Right now, it's sitting at that 48. Okay, average list price in the prior week. This is the one you're gonna freak out on. Listen to the nuance behind this number once I'm through going through all the numbers of the prior week. So average list price last week came to $724,929. That's up from the previous week by a big jump of $101K. What's the average sold price though? The average sold price was $701,561, making the difference between average list and average sold from this prior week come to $23,368. That's down from the previous week by almost 14K. That's a big drop. And the question here is this: what percentage off of list price were we actually selling at prior to this week, and how does that compare? Because our average list and average sold price this week is way off from where it's been, right? It's way higher by 100K. So what's the actual percentage off list price this week as compared to prior weeks? Is it the same? Is it more or less? Let's check it out. Before this, with an average around the low 600Ks of list price and our average sold price being about 9 to 10K below that, we were looking at homes being sold about 1.5% less than they were being listed at. This week, with that 23,000 and some change drop between average list and average sold price, we're actually looking at a difference of a little over 3%. That's actually twofold better in the buyer's favor than it was the previous week. Some other things come into this number. We'll go over it in the nuance after the rest of the numbers. The number of homes sold last week comes to 637. That's up by nearly 140 from the previous week, and we can see the trend line here just barely creeping up over time, but we're looking at all these data sets from the beginning of the second quarter, and you can see it was 530-ish, and maybe it's 540-ish on average now, but it's been pretty steady across that time. The number of properties currently under contract comes to 4,548. That's down by a little over 200 from the previous week. This has been trending down for the last couple of months now. Okay, the number of price reductions in the previous week. Price reductions, the number of times that a seller thought, I better drop my asking price in order to get a buyer under contract, to get an offer that I can accept. The number of times that happened in the previous week was 909. That's down by about 45 from the previous week. And this has trended up, obviously. If we're seeing this trend line, it goes right up off the chart. But for the last 2 weeks, it has come down by a similar amount, about 45 down 2 weeks in a row. Still obviously a pretty strong trend up there though. And finally, the number of times that a listing contract was either canceled, expired, or withdrawn comes to 491, up for a big jump from the previous week for our typical predictable first of the month spike on this number, up from the previous week by about 205. This is showing a slight rising trend over the last several months, but this being the first of the month, we do expect this number to drop sharply in the following few weeks. Okay, so there are 2 points of interest looking at the market's movements in this last week that I want to bring up. Neither of them are really urgent, but I think that some people looking at that raw data would feel urgent about them. First is the inventory dropping for the first time since early April of this year. That's really an insignificant drop, right? When we look at it, it's just down by 6 from the previous week, so a pretty insignificant drop. It's 1 week, it's not showing a trend. I believe that this number will continue to go up as we move into fall and winter. In truth, all through last week, I saw this number bump up over 9,000. It just happens that enough homes were sold this week and over the weekend in particular that now that we're looking at the numbers on Monday following, it's just dropped just barely under 9,000 and just by 6 under from the previous week. So I don't think it's a big deal. I mention this because it has been a big deal. I've made it a big deal. And I've celebrated a little bit every week, right? On this video series, because every week that our inventory comes up means that we're doing a better job meeting the demand for housing in Utah, and that's keeping inflationary pressure off of our housing market. And Utah's housing market needs that break from inflation. So just to be clear, here's this first drop in inventory that we've seen since mid or early April of this year, but I do think it's gonna continue to trend up. Okay, and the second point of interest, obviously that huge spike in average list price. And here's what I think that's really about. What I think that's really about this week, or this last week, is that in the last week, more homes of $1 million price or over sold than usual. And that pulled this average number way up from where it would normally be. Not for a second do I believe that our average home price is actually jumping up at this rate. Not for a moment do I believe that 720 something thousand is actually reflective of what the average home price is in Utah. So if you were planning on buying a home in the coming months, and if you were planning on buying a home in the 400 to 500K range, those are absolutely still out there. In fact, I checked across the counties in northern Utah that see our highest population, Salt Lake County, Utah County, Davis County, and Tooele County. There's still well over 1,000 homes between specifically the 400 to 500K range. That's absolutely still out there. Now, out of curiosity, I thought, well, how many homes that sold last week were over $1 million? And how far over $1 million were they? And I found something pretty interesting. So let me just read some of the stats that I found. So last week, homes that sold that were over $1 million, there were 64 homes over $1 million that sold last week. How many over $2 million? And that's twice as much. It's gonna have twice as big an impact as a $1 million home on these average home prices, right? 20 homes that were $2 million or over sold last week. 11 homes that were $3 million and over, 7 homes that were $4 million and over, 5 homes that were $5 million and over, 4 of which were between $6 and $9 million. And guys, there was one home that sold last week that was $30 million, sold for $30 million. How often does a $30 million home get sold in Utah? I checked once in the last year. I went back a month, I went back 6 months, I went back a year. Still, just one home is sold in the last year that was that price. In fact, there were only 2 in the last year that sold at over $20 million, and the one that wasn't $30 million was exactly $20 million. So the $30 million home is not sold every week. It's not even sold every month in Utah. It's barely sold once a year. So that's the data point that pulled our data up so drastically, I believe, on that average list price and average sold price and the difference between for this last week. All right, if you were watching those numbers, hopefully I've eased your mind a little bit. It's good to have the raw data and to know how to look at the nuance of that data so you know what you're looking at. You don't freak out unnecessarily when things seem off. If you or anybody you know was looking to buy or sell a home in the coming months, moving into fall or winter this year, I hope you'll find an agent that knows the numbers, the nuance behind those numbers, is extremely communicative with you, and will always represent your best interests. I hope you'll reach out to me if you don't have anybody in your little black book that fits that description. And of course, as always, if you want to stay educated better than anybody else in Utah on what's going on in Utah's real estate market, you can follow this channel, hit that subscribe, and you'll stay solid on what's going on here from week to week. As solid as I am. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next week.